when the bride returns from hell. They called it Our Lady of the Fallen Light, a brick church stranded at the edge of a shrunken Ohio town, where the factories went quiet first and the people followed. The place had a drunk's tilt to its steeple, as if even the cross had given up on balance. In the early photos, the church looked gentle, freshly painted for marriages and baptisms. In the recent ones, it looked like a mouth that had lost too many teeth. 5 of us went there at the end of October, when the maples had burned themselves down to bare branches, Mason the skeptic with a tripod, Lena, who could coax secrets out of a shutter, Jorge, who collected ghost stories the way other people collected baseball cards, Priya, a nurse who didn't believe in curses, but packed bandages anyway, and me, Tori, a radio intern who had learned that an audience loves a haunting if someone brave enough dares to narrate it. We came for a midnight segment, a Halloween special that might turn our small channels into something louder. The highway hummed under our tires like a throat clearing to warn us off. When we exited, the gravel spit under the wheels and the car door hinges creaked like someone whispering, "Wait." From the trees, a ragged nylon ribbon flicked and snapped. Just wind. We told ourselves, just wind. The first thing we noticed up close was the smear of red on the chapel wall, not fresh, but not yet erased by rain. Someone had painted a half circle that with generosity could be read as a halo. With less generosity, a grin. The second thing we noticed was a white scrap caught in the brambles near the steps. It was satin, or had been. It still carried the shape of a stitch, a memory of lace. And when Lena lifted it, dirt fell in a sad little rain. "You're sure the story's from here?" Mason asked, half annoyed, half thrilled. "Bride murdered at the altar by the groom. That's unsubtle." 1979. Jorge said, tapping his phone where he'd saved a clipping. Name was Eleanor Hart. Her groom, Vaughn Mercer, never stood trial, vanished. Rumors say he slipped into the stonework and waits there, or that the church swallowed him like it swallows sound. As if to object, a low moan rolled across the empty lot, only wind shaping itself through cracked, stained glass, but it pressed on the ribs the way a sob does when you try not to let it out. Priya took my hand, squeezed once. "If there's mold or nails, I'm the only tetanus shot in this group." "Keep rolling," I whispered from my recorder. We're at Our Lady of the Fallen Light, where the air itself carries a story. A bride. Eleanor did not make it past the vows. The town doesn't speak her name often, but the church tries to finish the sentence for them. From somewhere beyond the doors, an old bell coughed one dry metallic hiccup that should not have been possible with a rope rotted to thread. A bird startled from the eaves with a high choking cry, and for a second its wings sounded like thick paper turning itself. "Okay," Mason said, "that's not nothing." We slipped inside. The vestibule gave way to a long tiled aisle, a parade route for veils and flowers. Where the carpet had been, there was only the cool suggestion of footsteps in a path of dust. The pews stood like ribs cracked and gnawed by time. At the front, the altar wore a sheet the color of dirty snow. Behind it rose the bell tower, a ladder of shadows. Lena set up her camera on the center line. "Eleanor Hart," she said, not loudly, not reverently, just like a woman naming another woman. "If you want your story told, we're here to listen." The ceiling popped tiny temperature shock clicks that stitched together like a string of beads. Somewhere to the left, a drop of water found a bowl with a delicate plink that wouldn't stop once it started, plink, 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 as patient as a clock. Jorge brushed dust from a pew and sat. My grandmother used to say the grief is a bell tower with a bird trapped inside. You don't need anyone to pull the rope for the bell to move. Save that, I said. That's the kind of line that makes people share a podcast. We toured the side chapel first, where votives had once stuttered their starry prayers. The racks stood empty. A wall of cracked tile still held a wedding announcement from a different year, a different couple whose faces had been chewed away by mildew, until only their posture remained two bodies angled toward a future that, if they were lucky, did not involve this church. Lena shot close-ups of the tiles lingering on a hairline fracture that ran like a fault across a painted dove's eye. Imagine your last sight being a ceiling like this, she said. I'd rather not, Mason answered, but he filmed anyway. The recorder on my chest picked up our footfalls as papery whispers, the kind you hear when you cup a seashell and pretend it's the ocean. In the bell tower shaft, a length of chain swayed and clicked, tap, 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 tallying something we had not yet learned to count. At the choir loft, we found mirrors. Not original, the frame was cheap, the kind you'd buy for a rental apartment, but there were 4 leaning against the rails. Teens, Priya said, or artists, or mourners. In their tilted faces, we looked like a multiple-choice question no one wanted to answer. My mouth was dry. I lifted my recorder again. Eleanor, if there's a part of your story that stayed here, this is a chance to set it down. People will hear it. People will. A laugh cut me off, a woman's laugh, but not a happy one, high and bright the way glass sounds when it's nudged together in a sink. It came from the mirror to the right, or from behind it, or from the memory of a room where laughter was still allowed. We froze. Priya's hand found my wrist. Mason's eyebrows crawled toward his hairline. Lena, reckless or brave, lifted her camera and stepped toward the sound. It was Jorge who breathed first. Mrs. Hart, he said softly, as if he were the rude one for intruding. Somewhere outside, the wind shook the dead leaves, so they clattered like applause. We worked quickly after that because fear accelerates even careful people. Interviews, B-roll, an establishing shot of the tower for the edit. Mason strung a line of battery lanterns down the aisle, so we'd have a path if the sky went sudden and black. Priya unrolled bandages and set them at the end of every pew, a ritual that made no sense to anyone but a nurse who has learned that hope can be packed like gauze. Jorge read a clipped paragraph from a site that had stolen it from a book, that had stolen it from rumor, a groom's hand under a bride's veil. A whisper exchanged that no one else could hear. A sudden red on the white, a town that left the church to rot instead of repainting it. Why would the groom do it? Mason asked. And in the place where a joke would have been, there was only the crackle of our nerves. Men who promise forever are sometimes men who can't stand the size of it. Priya said, and her voice made me want to hold a stranger's hand. From the nave woods, a sound like a door trying to remember its own language. A soft skittering ran beneath the pew's mice, or something cleverer, and for a moment, all of us lifted our feet without agreeing to. If you're here, Lena told the air, we brought care. We brought witness. We brought somebody to edit out the boring parts. She flicked her focus ring. We also brought snacks. The joke loosened the top button of the night. We ate peanut butter crackers and shared water, and Jorge told a story about a bell tower in Puebla, where a candle burned for 50 years on the wrong side of a window. The priest said, "Leave it," he said. Some things, if they want to burn you, don't unburn them for your rules. At exactly 11:47, the bell rope, what was left of it, gave a twitch that made a dry rasp against the stone. The air held its breath. The little plink in the side chapel miscounted, and then found itself again. Plink, plink, plink. We were not children, but we huddled like we had invented the posture. Mason checked his watch and said the most practical sentence of the night. "We have 13 minutes before midnight." He did not need to finish the thought. Midnight is when stories choose their endings. We retreated to the narthex to set our plan, one of us in the choir loft, one at the altar, one by the tower door, one watching the entrance, one floating to document. "We'll rotate stations," Lena said. "Nobody alone for more than 5 minutes. Call if anything changes. And keep backup sound rolling." "Copy," I said, and the words sounded too loud, so I tried again softer, and even that sounded like a signature on paper. Before we split, Priya pressed a tiny silver bell into my palm, the kind you ring at a hotel desk. "If you get scared," she said, "ring. Even if it's silly." I didn't tell her that in a place like this. Making a bell sing felt like tearing a page out of someone else's diary. But I slipped it into my pocket anyway, because small reliances can look a lot like courage when you don't have the big kind. When we opened the door to return to the nave, the lanterns we had strung down the aisle flickered in unison. Not enough to go out, just enough to say we were expected. From high above, a faint chain murmur answered like bracelets shaken in a drawer. We took our stations. The church accepted us into its throat. Outside, the branches ticked at the stained glass like knuckles against a window. Inside, dust motes climbed through the lantern light like wishes no one had admitted to making. I could not tell if the chill came from the November wet stone or from something choosing a shape inside the dark. At 11:57, a woman's voice drifted from the aisle, a single hummed note thin as thread, steady as a seamstress at work. It slid between the pews and braided itself around the old air like a promise that had lived too long without being kept. "Eleanor," I whispered. And though my mouth made the shape of the name, it felt like the breath wasn't mine. A second voice joined the first. Lower a man's not, lyrics only tone. And the two lines met and did not agree, making a chord that made the hair rise along my arms. From the tower, a hinge let go with a sound. And then the smallest sound of metal kissing metal. Midnight approached deliberately. In the choir loft, Lena's silhouette became an ink-cut paper doll with a camera for a heart. At the altar, Jorge's shoulders squared so you couldn't see him shake. By the tower door, Mason leaned forward with his mouth set like a door jamb. Priya stood near the entrance, her hands stuffed in her pockets like she was tucking away every tremor. And when the first second of 12 o'clock landed, the church answered with a single clean bell strike that traveled through our bones the way light travels through a song. No rope swung, no hand pulled. Still the bell rang. I do not know which of us said we're here, only that something heard, and somewhere not far from the aisle, a white scrap lifted in a breeze that had not yet been born. We split into our stations as planned. The church seemed to breathe with us each exhale, making the lantern light tremble. Mason stood by the tower door, arms crossed too tightly. Jorge leaned on the altar as if it might steady him. Lena crouched in the choir loft lens, blinking like an eye, refusing to close. Priya lingered near the entrance, her shadow stretching across the tiles like a leash. I hovered between them all, a floating witness, with my recorder humming. The air carried a thin whistle, the kind of kettle makes right before boiling. Boards under our feet groaned, each complaint sharp as teeth grinding. "Do you feel that?" Priya whispered, pressing her palm to the wall, like the stone is vibrating. Before anyone answered, Lena's voice floated from above. "I see her." Our heads jerked up. In the choir loft, Lena's camera shivered. She wasn't smiling, not even faking it for the shot. By the aisle, she hissed, white dress moving. We turned. At first, it was just a smear, white against white, pale against dust. But then the shape steadied the drag of a gown across the floor, the shimmer of fabric that should have decayed decades ago. She moved slowly, as though each step had to be begged from the dark. Her veil clung to her face like wet tissue, obscuring everything but the curve of a mouth. The sound came then, fabric dragging crisp and rasping like paper tearing itself apart. With each step, a hollow echo followed, not the weight of feet, but the scrape of something unwilling to let go. Eleanor Jorge whispered too reverent for his usual sarcasm. The bride stopped halfway down the aisle. Her head tilted not fully, not gently, but like a string had been jerked. The veil lifted slightly, as if she were laughing without a sound. Then she moved again faster this time, jerking forward in bursts. The dragging turned to scraping louder, harsher, a scream and a claw. Mason swore. Priya covered her ears. Lena zoomed, camera shaking. I pressed record harder against my chest, as if closer contact could protect me. And then the bride was gone, just gone. The aisle lay empty. Dust hung in the air, heavy as if someone had shaken a rug. We all gasped at once, but Mason was pale. He pointed, mouth stiff. No, not gone. The veil now lay in the middle of the aisle. Just the veil. Torn, dirty, but still white enough to shine against the floor. Lena scrambled down from the loft. She was breathing too fast. "It's bait," she muttered. "It's never just left behind." From the tower, a single chain clinked deliberate like a metal finger tapping a glass. We regrouped at the altar. Jorge reached for the veil, but Priya slapped his hand away. "Don't touch what the dead offers," she snapped. Her nurse's authority turned into something older. I lifted my recorder. This is Tori. Midnight has passed. The bride of Our Lady appeared in the aisle. She moved like fabric being shredded. She left a veil. The others, my throat closed before I could finish. Behind us, the bell gave a shudder. Not a ring, not yet, but a sound like lungs deciding whether to scream. We froze again. The sound stretched, strained, then cut off. And in the silence after a cry, not ours. It was a woman's cry, high and sharp, the exact note between a laugh and a sob. It rattled the rafters, bounced down the stone, and clawed the air like fingernails on slate. Lena dropped to her knees, hands clamped over her camera. Jorge stumbled back. Priya gasped. Mason swore again. When the sound finally cut, the veil on the floor was gone. In its place, streaks. Dark streaks, like someone had dragged something wet down the aisle. Blood, or what memory wanted to look like blood. Priya shook her head violently. "We have to go." But the doors behind her slammed shut. The sound was thunder in wood, a crack that shoved the dust up in clouds. Then the lock slid not by key, but by pressure. We heard the scrape of iron bolts that hadn't been whole in decades. The bride was keeping us. Mason banged the door with his shoulder. Jorge shouted. Priya kicked at it, her face white with panic. And then the organ burst to life. No one touched it. No one had sat there. Still, its pipes groaned, belched, screamed. The sound wasn't a hymn, but a dissonant dirge, each chord jagged like broken teeth. The music clawed at the air, too loud for the size of the church. Lena lifted her camera again. She was trembling, but filming, always filming. "This is history," she whispered, almost manic. But the bride wasn't satisfied with sound. She wanted touch. From the shadows of the altar, something moved hands. Pale hands not attached to arms, slipping across the tiles like spiders. Each dragged nails behind them, leaving trails in the dust. The nails made a noise, scrape, 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 like chalk breaking against a board. Priya screamed. The first hand clutched Mason's ankle. He kicked, shouting. The second reached for Jorge. He staggered back, tripped on a pew, fell hard. I yanked my bell from my pocket and rang it. The tiny silver bell gave a pathetic ding, 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 too soft, too fragile. But it echoed strangely, multiplying into a chorus that didn't belong to such a toy. For a moment, the organ stuttered as if choked. The hands retreated, but the bride's voice did not. She laughed, high-cutting, splintered into shards that sliced every corner of the church. The laugh became a scream, then folded back into silence like paper burning without flame. We collapsed together, gasping. The church had shown us its teeth, and we understood this was only the beginning. The church had gone still again, as if mocking us for thinking the last terror might be the worst. We sat huddled near the altar, lungs ragged, skin clammy. The lanterns still burned, but their glow had dulled, as if something unseen had cupped its hands over them. Mason spat, trying to steady his voice. We need to move. Sitting makes us pray. Where Priya shot back. The doors are sealed. Windows are stone. You saw the hands. But Jorge, ever the collector of stories, whispered, the legend always said one thing. She doesn't let you leave. The only escape is through her. We stared. Through her, I echoed, sick at the idea. Yes, confront her. Finish the vows she never did. Lena gave a humorless laugh. Oh, great. We just marry a ghost bride. Easy. The organ let out a cough. Two sour notes sharp as knives clashing. From above, the bell groaned like a throat preparing to sing. The sound silenced us. We knew arguing meant nothing now. She was listening. We agreed to search the tower. Maybe the bell itself was the key. Maybe the sound could undo her grip. Mason took lead, Jorge close behind. Priya and I followed Lena, trailing with her camera still stubbornly rolling. The stairs spiraled in tight circles, stone worn slick by decades of feet. Each step moaned under us. Chains above clinked slow and mocking, as if timing our climb. Wind hissed through cracks, but it wasn't wind. It whispered names not ours, but hers. Eleanor, Eleanor, Eleanor. Halfway up, Priya stopped. Do you smell that? It was iron, rust and blood. When we reached the belfry landing, the smell sharpened. There spread across the stone were drag marks. Long red-brown streaks like a body hauled and left. And at the center, bones. Small, shattered, blackened by weather. Animal, Mason said, but his voice cracked. Bride, Jorge whispered. Remains. Before we could move closer, the bell above us shifted. It groaned a low metallic swell, then boomed once so loud, the air shook our chests. The strike echoed and doubled, rattling our teeth, and for a moment, every lantern below flickered out. When the sound ebbed, the bride was standing in the stairwell below us. Her veil dragged against the stone, and her head twitched in jerks, unnatural like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. She raised one hand bony beneath translucent skin. In the other, she held a rope, the frayed ancient rope of the bell, and she pulled. The bell screamed, vibrating the whole tower, the sound splitting air into knives. It carried voices in it, not just metal, but hundreds of whispers layered until they shrieked as one. Mason staggered. Cover your ears. But Priya was too slow. She screamed not in pain, but in shock as the bride's veil slithered forward like a white snake. It wrapped Priya's arm, coiled to her shoulder, and yanked. Priya, I screamed. The sound of fabric tightened wet and sharp like rope on flesh. She was dragged down the steps, her feet pounding nails, clawing at stone. The bride hauled her with impossible strength, veil stretching long as a serpent. We chased, but too late. Priya's body slammed against the lower landing. Her head snapped back with a crack. The sound was hideous, a bone breaking like green wood. Her body went still. The veil unwrapped, slithered back toward the bride, like it was feeding. Priya lay motionless, neck twisted at an angle no living thing could survive. The first death. Lena sobbed, still filming, even through tears. "Oh God, oh God." "Don't look," Mason barked, but none of us could look away. The bride tilted her head again, veil fluttering. From beneath it came a sound, a laugh, soft at first, like glass clinking. Then it grew sharper, louder, until it became a jagged wail that filled every corner. We backed up the stairs, dragging one another. Priya's body stayed below, abandoned her face, lost in shadow. In the belfry, the wind howled harder, though no window was open. The chains whipped, clattering like teeth in a metal jaw. "We have to end this," Jorge said, gripping a lantern like a weapon, "or we're all next." But Mason shook his head pale. "She won't let us end it. She wants us broken first." And already I could hear something beneath the laughter, a dragging. The scrape of feet against stone. The echo of something being hauled back down the aisle where it began. She was returning Priya, returning her to the church floor, and waiting for the rest of us. The air inside the tower pressed heavy after Priya's death. Every breath was like swallowing wet cloth. Mason paced, fists clenched. Jorge held the lantern too tight, flame trembling with him. Lena stood in the corner, camera pointed at the stairwell, her whisper shaking. "She's not finished. She won't stop." I forced myself to speak. "We go down. We can't leave her body. Not like that. No one wanted to, but we had no choice. Together we descended. Each step creaked like knuckles popping, echoing in slow, deliberate rhythm. Somewhere below, something dragged, scrape, fingers across stone. When we reached the nave again, Priya's body had been arranged. No longer twisted, no longer in the stairwell. She lay in the aisle, face covered by the veil, hands crossed on her chest as if posed for a funeral. Lena sobbed once sharp. Mason grabbed her arm, pulling her away. "Don't look at her." But Jorge was staring at something else, the mirrors. The ones we had seen earlier in the choir loft. They weren't there before. Now 4 stood in the nave, perfectly aligned, reflecting the altar. The air trembled with a faint humming like glass being stroked by a wet finger. Jorge stepped closer. "She wants us to see, to face her." "No," Mason snapped. "She wants us to bleed." But it was too late. The first crack came. A sound like ice splitting, sharp, violent. The leftmost mirror fissured across the middle. The crack echoed as if the whole church itself had fractured. Inside the crack, we saw her. Not in white anymore, her dress was soaked dark, dragging with blood. Her mouth beneath the veil was wider now, teeth sharp as broken porcelain. Jorge backed away, whispering prayers. Lena kept filming, shaking, whispering, my God," into the lens. The second mirror cracked. Glass split again, shrieking high, the scream made physical. Tiny shards rained onto the tiles, tink, tink, tink. I caught my reflection in the broken surface. My face stared back, then moved on its own. Its eyes were black, its mouth stretching open in a silent howl. I staggered back. Mason cursed. "Don't look into them," he shouted. But Jorge couldn't stop. The third mirror was his. It cracked a jagged lightning bolt across the pane, and the sound rang like a bell struck too hard. His reflection blinked, then smiled. Not Jorge's smile. Something sharper, something hungry. The glass swelled outward. A hand shot from the mirror, pale and skeletal, gripping Jorge's cheek. The scrape of nails across skin tore the silence. We lunged for him, but the mirror pulled. Shards burst outward, slicing the air. The crash of glass was deafening a rain of knives. When the mirror fell, Jorge was screaming. His face, God. His face was carved in ribbons, blood pouring down his shirt. He clawed at the air, trying to rip something invisible away. Each slice made a wet tearing sound like paper ripping underwater. We dragged him back, but the damage was done. His face was ruined, his eyes wild. He screamed louder words, choking in blood. The mirrors fell silent. Only one remained whole. The bride appeared inside it, standing tall, veil fluttering. She raised her hand and pressed it to the glass. Blood smeared inside as if the mirror itself bled. A deep hum rolled from it, vibrating the floor, the pews, our bones. Lena was crying now, but still filming. She's feeding on us. She wants every one of us. Jorge collapsed, twitching his face, unrecognizable. Still breathing, but broken. Mason pulled me close. She's not going to stop until we're all either dead or worse. We need to break the last one. I nodded, though terror froze my hands. We lifted a pew together and hurled it forward. The crash thundered splinter on stone mirror against wood. Glass shrieked as it split, screaming like a choir of blades. The last mirror shattered, but the bride did not vanish. Instead, her laugh rang out high and brittle, bouncing from wall to wall until it sounded like dozens of voices mocking us. And then silence. We turned. Jorge was gone, his body dragged away, leaving only a trail of blood across the tiles. The church had claimed him. The death tally had grown, and we knew the next would not be far behind. The nave reeked of iron and dust. Blood streaks painted the aisles, Jorge's trail already darkening like old ink. Only 3 of us remained, Mason, Lena, and me. Our lanterns flickered, their glow stretched too thin. Lena clutched her camera like it was a crucifix. She won't stop until the bell rings again. Mason growled. Then we ended at the tower. We dragged ourselves back to the stairwell steps, echoing like a drumbeat of doom. The chains above rattled, clink, 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 like something climbing faster than we could. From the nave behind us, a dragging sound returned, heavy wet, like fabric soaked in blood, sweeping the stone. At the landing, the bell loomed. Its iron belly was black with rot rope dangling in shredded strands. "She wants us here," Lena whispered. "This is where it began." Mason shoved forward. "Then it ends here." He grasped the rope. The fibers moaned, grinding as he pulled. The bell roared, boom, deep, furious, shaking the tower. Dust rained from the rafters. And with the strike, she appeared. The bride. Her gown billowed, though there was no wind-torn, lace-stained crimson. Her face beneath the veil was nothing but shadow, except for her mouth smiling wide enough to split skin. Her laugh followed sharp, brittle clanging against the bell's echo until it became unbearable. She reached for Mason. Chains whipped around his wrists, iron clamping shut. He screamed, straining. The bell groaned again as the chains lifted him upward, clattering like 100 rattling bones. "Help me," he roared. We tried, but the chains dragged too fast. Up higher into the shadows, then release. The sound of his body slamming against stone thundered as he fell. The crack of bone on the tile echoed like a gunshot. He lay broken at the foot of the tower, blood seeping out in a black pool. The bride turned to us. Lena raised her camera, shaking, whispering, "Keep rolling, keep rolling." Her gown slithered across the floor like a living thing. The fabric shot forward, twisting. It wrapped Lena's neck. The sound of silk tightening filled the air. Hiss squeezed, constrict. Lena dropped her camera, clawing her throat. Her face flushed, eyes bulging. She gurgled, kicking. The choking noise was sickening wet and sharp, every gasp a tear of cloth. I tried to grab her, but the gown jerked tighter. Her body went limp, head slumped at an impossible angle. The gown slid free, leaving her on the floor lifeless. Only me remained. The bride drifted closer, veil trembling. Her shadow fell over me. I stumbled back, clutching the little silver bell. "No," I whispered. "No," I rang it. Ding, 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 pathetic little notes. But this time, they multiplied, swelling into a chorus that shook the air. For a moment, the bride froze. Then she laughed louder, as if mocking my last offense. The laugh split into shrieks, into whispers, into the toll of 1,000 phantom bells. I dropped the bell, covering my ears. The world spun. And then black. They found me days later, alone, crouched in the aisle, muttering. Priya, Mason, Lena, Jorge, all gone. No bodies, no blood trails, just me. I couldn't speak of it, not coherently. Only the sound, always the sound. Because at midnight, every night since I hear it, the bell tolls. Boom! Deep, final. And over it, her laugh high, cutting endless. The town avoids the church still. They say its ruins are empty. But I know better. The bride keeps her vow, and she's waiting for more. If that story chilled you, imagine what's next. Don't miss it. Hit subscribe and join us in the dark.